Action tip number 6 is make the best of all materials available to you. Begin by preparing visual and audio support. Well, things like charts, graphs, slides, overhead transparencies, videotape, or music that might help reinforce your message. And make sure you start working on these well in advance. Some of them take a while to prepare. Next, check the physical environment, the room you'll be speaking in. Make sure you have enough chairs and that they're set up properly. And also, double check things like the audio system, videotape recorders, movie projectors, well, even coffee pots, and anything else you'll need. Be certain everything is there and working properly. Now, finally, organize your notes. Make sure they're all in the right order and that you can get to them easily. Now, this kind of physical preparation isn't difficult, but it isn't done, it can lead to disaster. We now come to our 7th action tip, and that is, remember that you and your listeners need each other. So often we think of the audience as an adversary, a group of people just waiting to tear down what we're saying. But that's not the case. Most of the time, the audience either needs to know what you're telling them or wants to know. So the potential is there for great chemistry. Your challenge is to activate that chemistry. It then becomes a win-win situation for everybody. The listeners get what they want, and you achieve your goals. You also get a great feeling from knowing that you clicked with your audience.
Unfortunately, many speakers never connect with their listeners, and that's because they don't consider the background of their audience. They assume people know more than they really do. They ignore action tip 8. Understand your listener's level of understanding.
Okay, let me tell you what we're going to be learning in this training program. First, we'll start off with RAB inputting into our modular frames. Then we'll move on to aux conversions into our main systems. And then finally, we'll move on to transfer variables. Any questions?
Any questions? This speaker lost her audience in the first 10 seconds. She assumed that because she knew a lot of technical jargon, they would too. No way. Don't assume anything like this. Take the time to find out the background of your audience. Then tailor your remarks accordingly. Remember, your audience is your customer, so be conscious of their needs. In fact, anticipate what your listeners want to know. That's action tip number 9. Determine your listeners' interests and informational needs. If necessary, talk to them and find out what they want from the presentation. Or do research on similar groups with the same interests.
Action tip number 10 deals with a related subject. Assess what your listeners expect. Now, in most cases, your audience will know what you're supposed to talk about. So make sure you have a good reason before you shift gears and give them something they're not expecting. And when you do that, let them know very early in your remarks that you're making this change. Now let's move on to action tip 11. Build your presentation around listener questions. Now this simply means we anticipate all the questions they might want answered and make a list of possible questions and then make sure you know all the answers. Now incorporate most of this information into your main presentation. The rest can come out during a question and answer period if there is one.
It's now time to start putting together the actual presentation, and that leads to our next action tip, number 12. Be clear about your central theme and key ideas. The central theme is a summary statement of what you want your audience to do or think. State it in simple, precise words. For example, if you're talking about marketing a new car, your central theme might be expressed like this.
Ladies and gentlemen, very simply, we want people to know that this will be the sportiest car on the market, and we want you to have the tools needed to get this message across. That's our goal, and we intend to achieve it.
Very simple and direct. Next, you want to bring in the key ideas that support that central theme. These are more specific and explain how the theme will be achieved. Action tip 13 involves using a variety of support for these key ideas. We'll begin with comparisons, analogies. A good analogy can often communicate an idea far more interestingly and clearly than a detailed explanation.
We think this new device can have the same impact worldwide as the fax machine. It's that strong a product.
This analogy is more powerful than any set of details. It graphically conveys the company's goal. Other ways to support your key ideas are through examples, statistics, and expert quotes. The goal is to reinforce your key ideas so impressively that the audience buys into the central theme of your presentation.
It's also important to organize your ideas in a strategic pattern. Action tip 14 says, arrange your ideas for clarity and impact. Now, in doing so, think of two guys named Biff and Bill. Now, Biff stands for big idea first, and Bill stands for big idea a little later. This big idea is the main point you want to make. It's what you want your listeners to do or think when you've finished your presentation. If the group is likely to accept your big idea, put it first at the beginning of your presentation. But put the big idea later when you have to convey bad news, controversial information, or ideas your audience may be unwilling to accept. Give supporting information first before announcing the big idea. The key again is understanding your audience and being sensitive to their reactions. That's always the best guide in shaping your presentation. It's now time to start talking, to make your actual presentation. So think about action tip 15. Its message, relax. And you're probably saying, sure, that's easier said than done. And that's valid. If you're nervous, it's hard to relax. But as we've indicated earlier, if you're prepared, you'll be less nervous and more relaxed. One of the ways to prepare is by simply practicing your presentation. The more you do it, the more you'll feel confident. But at times, there may still be some anxiety. So action tip 16 gives us some physical techniques to reduce this anxiety.